just quick reminder. We are Job. It makes me think of Jeff and I watched this YouTuber guy talking about he's a cryptocurrency Bitcoin guy. His name is George, and he introduces every one of his videos. He says, "Hello, I am George," and then he says, "We are George." So it's this kind of a collective idea. But I just want to draw your attention that the way I see Job and how I'm approaching it is Job is this incredible story in Scripture about a real individual, a real human life that is, I will say, directly reflective of every human life, okay? Even though Job's specifics as far as what he went through might be different, and maybe we haven't gone through something like that, what I'm trying to show you is that what is happening in the heart and in the mind of Job is human. It's what every human goes through. It's what we will go through in a very real sense. So I want to emphasize that. So we are Job, and I'm going to consistently try to help you or prod you to try to look at your own heart and recognize the connection points between your life, your thinking, and Job. Okay, and in light of that, I'm never, even if it sounds like it, or if you think it sounds like it, I am not here beating up on Job. Okay, so this isn't condemnation in this sense. That this is not a should. Okay, and I know it's kind of a crass pun, but I'm not shoulding on you. Okay, this is not a should thing. This is just talking about what is, and that's what I believe. It's just interesting how we humans turn the stories of Scripture into shoulds versus looking at them as, hey, this is God is presenting to us the is of Job's life. This is what happened, and so in the contextual idea, as far as the tragedy of Job, it's an is. So this is what takes place. This is what happens, and then as we get a glimpse into his heart, this is what happens. And I will tell you, nowhere in Job does God ever look at Job and say, you should have acted differently, or you should have thought differently, or you should. God never does that. So as I am approaching Job, I'm going to consistently emphasize that for you too, that this isn't about shoulds, even though I promise you that's where your mind consistently goes, okay? And I'll try to even show you that as you ask me questions or as you have a statement. Oftentimes, it is because you're thinking of, okay, well then, what should have happened? Or the idea, it was brought up at the beginning of Job, that okay, we're looking at Job, we're looking at his testing in a sense. That's, again, churchianity kind of gives us this idea that Job his faith is being tested, and let's see how it goes. And so what usually happens is we Christian people, normal human beings, we're looking at Job and we're going, okay, all right, what should have Job done? All right, I'm going to make a list now of when I go through my Job experience, I need to get stronger, I need to get better, but it just automatically goes to that. And I want to encourage you to try to step back from that and just observe Job, look at his heart, and let's talk about, all right, what do we think God is doing? And we're going to get there today as far as, even though we still don't see God inserted in the story, because we're only going to get to some verses in chapter 7. We don't see God insert himself like for real. I mean, we don't see God's voice or him say anything in the book of Job until the last 2 chapters of Job. Okay, but I'm still going to encourage you to. We're going to try to look this morning at, okay, what do we think God's doing with this story? Why this story? Why this stuff that we're seeing about Job? So those are some of the quick reminders. I'm going to remind you of the Philippians passage that I think is the theme, the overarching theme that I want us to keep thinking about with Job, and that is, he who began a good work in you will complete it. He who began a good work in you will complete it. And that's what he's doing with Job. And he shows us this in an agonizing way. So last week, I'm going to pick up where we kind of left off with last week. And if you look at the third chapter of Job, Job says in verses 25 and 26, he says, "For the thing that I fear comes upon me, and what I dread befalls me." And he says, "I am not at ease, nor am I quiet. I have no rest, but trouble comes." So this morning, at least this morning, and this will be a continued theme throughout Job and all of Scripture, and I talked a little bit about rest, but I thought you were really quick and you were throwing up Job up there. So man, I'll put Job / creatures. I'll put man that's us, man, woman, everybody. So Job, well, I'll say this. We've already kind of set this up like this, but the burden or load of, I'll say, of autonomy. The burden or load of autonomy. Again, we talked about this. All right, this is what I at least with how the words that I use, I believe that the inherent problem of mankind is our desire to be autonomous, to be my own person. I get to choose. I choose right and wrong. I'm not going to go into it. If you guys haven't heard that yet, I think it's probably the first or the second lesson that we had in Job. So you can go back and look at it on YouTube. But it is the basis of everything that we talk about here. So the problem of every creature that walks the face of this earth, even before we can talk, is I want to choose for myself what is right and wrong, by myself. The toddler example. So, but that responsibility, you ready, Patrick?
Sure.
The responsibility of that, or the burden of that, is no rest. No rest for the weary. It's a constant burden. It's a constant load. And think about that. Me believing I'm in control of my life, wanting to be in control of my life, and the lens through which I look at everything in my life is this lens of autonomy or self-sovereignty is a burden. It is an exponential burden. And then we're going to see that with Job. Okay, so he says this right here at the beginning. Now, you could say, well, look at what he's going through. Yeah, you're right. Look at what he's going through. And look at how what he's going through is going to reveal the inside of his heart, okay? By the way, I'm wearing this because Gonzaga plays at 11 o'clock this morning, all right? In case you don't know. College basketball fan. I have a t-shirt too that says Gonzaga. For the thing that I fear comes upon me, what I dread befalls me. I am not at ease, nor am I quiet. I have no rest, but trouble comes. And this trouble that we talked about last week that we built. So the trouble is this. Trouble is translated as, or can be, as this idea of working, of work, or toil in the Hebrew word. And the way that Job is talking about it is, I have no rest, but trouble comes. Let's see, I have that on my other notes from last week, but there's some other verses that use the same word in the same context. That the life of a person is just filled with, and again, a person is saying this, whether it's David or Solomon. We kind of saw that with Ecclesiastes, where basically Solomon is saying, man's life is just filled with toil, work, and from a human standpoint, it's kind of tainted with this negative aspect of trouble. Okay, so it's work, toil, trouble. So that's what Job says right away. He says, I can't rest. I have no rest, my mind is not at ease, and we can all identify with that because we know Job just lost his whole family. He's still faced with this overwhelming amount of grief. So that's just normal, and we can understand that. Okay. Again, I'm not saying that he shouldn't be feeling like this. This is his heart crying out as a human, saying, "I'm full of trouble. And it's this work." So I hope you can see when you see that word trouble associated with work. So now, what is that work? What's the toiling that's going on? Okay, we've already laid out a lot of this, but let's look at this. So I want to lay out this work or this toil that's going on. And again, not outward work. We're not chopping wood. We're not building a house. We're not laying a foundation. No, we're talking about the work that exhausts the soul. Okay, so now we're talking about soul working or troubling or toil. So work. And my first note here is this work. What is this work? Now, before I give it away, before I ask you a quiz question, let me read this verse. So go to Job chapter 4, verses 7 through 9. And I'm not reading through all of Job. It's Hebrew poetry, and I would encourage you to read it, especially as we go through it at home. But it can be really heavy in the sense that Job, like what I'm going to read here in a second, it's very negative, and Job is basically saying the same thing over and over again. So even as the different things that I point out, he'll just repeat it in a different way. It's kind of the way Hebrew poetry even goes or works. But he says this in chapter 4, verses 7 through 9. He says, this is not Job, this is his friend. And we already talked about this last week. But he says, Remember who that was innocent ever perished? Or where were the upright cut off? As I have seen, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. And by the breath of God they perish, and by the blast of his anger they are consumed. So I'm gonna introduce you to one type of work. Here's a type of work. And what are you hearing when Eliphaz says this? Again, picture he's sitting across from Job. Job's in his grief. It's terrible. And again, we talked a little bit about this verse already last week. But what kind of work is this? Or why do you think I'm talking about this in terms of work?
Well, he's reasoning, right? He's saying, sinners perish because of sin. That idea that you do something wrong, you reap a punishment. So he's attempting to reason with Job, getting at the heart of Job's current situation and saying, no, wicked people suffer when
Let's see. Yeah, keep going, Dave. Got anything else?
Yeah, and then, righteous people aren't, you're not going to suffer in the same way. So that's his reasoning. And I think we do, but in terms of the way all of us survive, we do that internally. When we have any difficult or challenging situation, we reason it out, and that toil is churning in our minds, trying to rationalize what's happening, put it in its place, find the cause, so that we can identify it, eliminate it, and get out of the situation.
Okay, guys, hear that? So the toiling that goes on in a human brain, it just clicked right there with it's cause and effect. I'm trying to figure out the cause of something, or the reason for something, or the why for something. And it's not just to know. That's not what we're looking for. Yes, we are. Solomon showed that in Ecclesiastes. The way God created our mind, we want to know why. We want to connect the dots. Again, totally natural. But then we take it a step further in this toiling piece, in the trouble piece, as autonomous, we're not really autonomous, okay? Self-imposed autonomy or self-sovereignty, me wanting to be independent, if that helps even better. I'm choosing for myself. Not only do I want to I should say, there's a reason why I want to know why. Even if you say, hey, I just want to know why. Why do you want to know why? Do you know why you want to know why? I've never said why that many times in 10 seconds. Do you know why you want to know why? You just said to be in charge? To be in charge how? I mean, there's a bunch of different reasons for that. One, I'm troubleshooting what God is doing. There's one thing. I'm thinking this is bad. Job is believing, and it's bad. In his mind, this is bad. It hurts. It's terrible. It's grief-filled. So in the human mind, the independent human mind that I think I'm in control, I'm looking at this and saying, this is bad, God. This is not right. So there's one part of there's some toiling and some working. I'm making a decision, and I'm armchair quarterbacking God. Again, totally normal. It's what we all do. And with this verse right here, what is going on? So it's this cause and effect. It's not just, it's all of the above. It's comprehensive. But specifically with this verse, Eliphaz is saying, hey, look, this bad stuff doesn't happen to good people. So he's already wrong. It's already wrong thinking. It's bad theology. He's not a good whatever. He's not a good theologian right here. So he's already wrong in that sense, but it's still normal human thinking. Okay? He's saying, hey, come on, Job. Bad things don't happen to good people. Bad things happen to bad people. So what's behind the why? What's Eliphaz trying to get to here in the cause and effect? Conditional blessings and curses.
If you want to get out of your suffering, acknowledge your sin.
So there's something you have to do. There's the working piece. First, you got to acknowledge your sin, Job. And this happens over and over again with the conversation, okay? Come on, Job. He's whacking him on the head saying, you got to acknowledge your sin. This happens to sinners. Everybody knows that, dummy. That's in a sense what he's saying. Everybody knows that, stupid. So you must have sinned. God doesn't just do this. But there's the toiling, the working, the trouble within the human heart. Any other ideas there as far as the cause and effect and what's behind the why? Okay, we're going to get to that here in a second too. You guys hear them? The trust piece, Like,
that's why you question. You don't trust it.
Even a benign question from a child saying why. And look, they can, guys, again, I'm not condemning even that idea. A child can have a good motive to say, I want to know why. But the bottom line is that still reveals the burden of autonomy or self-sovereignty or independence that kid is taking on. Because they can't just rest in what dad is saying to go, oh, okay. Great, yeah, I'll rest in that. I can just trust that. No, the immediate asking why, it shows the normal human heart. Again, I don't want you to be bothered by the fact. It's okay, in one sense, to ask why. It's okay to want to know why. And I believe God believes that. He created us that way in a very real sense. So it's okay, and it reveals your lack of trust in God. Okay, I hope you guys, any clarification with that or any pushback there? Or yeah, Patrick.
It seems to me like what Job was having a hard time with, aside from the incredible suffering, is God is silent at this.
Yeah, and that's hard for Job. It's hard for everybody.
That's a tough one. Yeah.
I mean, think about when you've been through that kind of time in your life where you're experiencing real trouble and turmoil inside, and you're wanting something from God. You're whatever that something is. You're wanting deliverance. You're wanting peace. You're wanting comfort. You're wanting help in the situation, and it seems like you're distant from God, and God isn't there. He's not answering. He doesn't feel close. Now this is, again, even think about me saying that, because what is the truth about God? He's always there. Again, that's what we're going to see with Job here. So there's this interesting human experience that I feel like God isn't there. I'm believing God is not there. This goes back to that, believing lies. I'm believing something that's not true. I'm creating a narrative in my head that's not true. because of my functioning as a self-sovereign, independent, autonomous person. But yet I'm not believing the truth. I'm not realizing the truth. Okay, I feel like God's not there, but He is there. I'll put this. This is kind of I'll just put this up front right here. So God's word, again, Jesus saying, "My burden is light." Was it my yoke is easy first? I'll just say, "My burden is light." Paraphrasing, "Come to me, all who are weary, and I will give you rest." Let's see how this works, or how this is working in this story of Job. Okay? So that's what God promises. That's what God is doing. But yet we don't see that necessarily. Job doesn't believe that yet right now. Okay, so let's keep on talking about the toiling. Job chapter 5, verse 6 through 7. And I brought this up. No, I didn't bring it up last week, but it says this. And this is still Eliphaz. Yes. He says, "For affliction does not come from the dust, nor does trouble sprout from the ground." Again, that's the same word for trouble that Job used when he says, "I have no rest." And then he says, "But man is born to trouble." Again, think of not just experiencing things that we think is troubling. What this is referring to is man is born for toiling in this trouble. It's the working inside. And again, think about that in terms of, again, the toddler. How have you seen if you've never had a toddler, how is that toddler from the very beginning, before they even talk, toiling or troubling? I've given the example 1,000 times. How is it? What do you know that toddler or that baby, before he or she even talks, is doing or toiling in?
Focusing on itself.
So, numero uno. So their worldview is them. That's it. And how do they view everybody else? Guys, I'm talking before they talk.
They want what they want when they want it.
They want what they want when they want it. And how they want it. Guys, they troubleshoot you before they even talk. That's why they cry all the time, because they can't communicate what they're thinking. Maybe I should say what they're feeling. I don't know. What's that?
Probably more accurate.
What they're feeling?
Yeah, what they're feeling. What right now is going through their feeling.
Whether it's food, look, it's a necessity. It's life stuff. But they have, again, from their view, numero uno, their view is, I need this now. Not later. Yeah, whatever. So that's humans. That's our life. And Eliphaz says an amazing truth here. But man is born to trouble, to toiling, to working, as the sparks fly upward. He gives this great visual of a fire. You guys know fire. Guess where all the sparks go? They don't go that way. They don't go this way. Everything goes this way. He gives us, it's like, this is what it's like to be a human. He probably doesn't even realize the truth that he's saying there regarding the depth of that. As far as this is what man is born for, his life, this is what it is. He's born for trouble. And then the irony is not just like the bad stuff that Job has experienced. No, that he's born for the toiling that's going on inside. Yeah, Dave.
For instance, now Job is, well, they're doing the math. Right? It's interesting because it's revealing kind of how they view their relationship with God. Even, looking back at how Job is managing everything, managing the farm, the people, the sacrifices, even going, hey, maybe I'll give an extra sacrifice just in case one of my kids sins somewhere. So he's crunching the numbers, and this guy's crunching the numbers in this equation and saying, hey, look, it's out of balance, Job. clearly, there's some variable, Job, that you missed, and something you either didn't do or did, but there's some mathematical variable. It's interesting because even between this person and how Job later on starts to talk about God it's not relational, it's formulaic. It's a process, it's a set of procedures, it's steps,
Hey, you guys hear that? Great point there. He says, we talk a lot about relational here, that what God is doing, this idea of Emmanuel, God with us, has everything to do with the relationship that God has and is establishing with you, with us. But the human mind has put this all in a mathematical process. I'm not a math guy, but I like what you said. We're crunching the numbers. Let's see how this continues, because I want to get through this. I have some notes here about trouble, labor, toil. Psalm, don't turn there, but it says Psalm 25, verses 17 through 18 says, "The troubles or distresses, toilings of my heart are enlarged. Bring me out of my distress. Consider my affliction and my trouble, and forgive all my sin." Psalm 90 says, "The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength 80. Yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone and we fly away." And again, that's from a human perspective saying that. David, the psalmist, going through the toiling and the trouble, okay? Proverbs 3:5, I brought this up at the end, we didn't have time, but Proverbs 3:5 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." And what I have in my notes here, it says it is hard work to trust in yourself, to trust in your own understanding. That's where this trust, now we're talking about trust. So from this perspective, this toil and trouble is hard work to trust me. I'm going to make an important, really, I hope you guys can hear this. And there's lots of discussions that I've had with my wife Ronnie and Jeff and a lot of people regarding kind of this idea. I talk a lot about healthy skepticism of my own thinking, okay? Especially in the context of counseling, okay? When I'm talking to people in their life struggles, eventually we get to the talking about this concept, especially from a Christian perspective, the concept of being skeptical of my own thinking. Jeff has talked about it a lot, not trusting in your own thinking, okay? I am not talking about an idea that says, okay, I'm going to start groveling around thinking I'm wrong about everything. That's not what that means, okay? You guys want to give me some feedback or tell me what...
Latching onto a false belief.
Okay, what'd you say?
Latching onto a false belief that changes your behavior.
Okay, he just said the thinking that I'm talking about right here, to not trust, is latching onto something that's not true. What? An unfirm foundation? Maybe Jeff can do this research. And I'm sure you've got some quotes, and I've got some quotes from secular psychologists that talk about the speculation that people do in their heads about their situations, okay, and about what we believe, and then how we act on that. It is fascinating, and what Jeff and I are doing with counseling all the time is just trying to help a person stop the speculation about their current situation, or try to just understand, stop for a second, stop the toiling inside, and just acknowledge what is true about their situation. Because guess what the human mind does with everything? Do you know? You just speculate. You go to hypothetical situations. Especially think about it in terms of conflict. I mean, hopefully you have an example in your head right now as far as a conflict you either are in All of you are in conflict with somebody right now, okay? I know that. Just don't lie. It might not be blatant conflict, okay, or some bad knockout, drag out fight, but there's somebody in your life that if they even look at you a certain way, your mind goes crazy. Again, don't lie. I know it's true. Maybe you don't have that right now, but it could be your kid. It could be your spouse. It could be your neighbor. I mean, how often does that happen to you? Don't answer. How often does it happen to where somebody doesn't even have to say anything, and think about texts and emails. How many times have you gotten a text or an email, and you are now going, what do you mean by that? And then you just fill in the blanks from that point forward. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about as far as understanding. If you can recognize that that's what you do, that perhaps a large part of your thinking that is causing you the toil and trouble, especially as it relates to relationships, is not true, maybe. I know my wife always pushes back and says, well, it could be true, or it could be partially true. Even if it's accurate. Come on, Jeff.
It doesn't matter as much as you think it does, or it doesn't have the weight, or it doesn't threaten you. I mean, going back to the baby illustration of the infants, or Job's context, the struggle is, I have got to protect myself. I have to secure myself. I can't accept the fact that life is fallen and that we're surrounded by trouble. I've got to put this trouble to an end. I've got to manage the situation to make this stop. And so even when we go down those paths, we may be accurate. We may perceive something about someone that may be accurate, but what makes it toxic to us, for starters, and it pours out into other people's lives too, what makes it toxic to us is that self-preserving, which tends to then twist, tends to exaggerate. Even if there's something that's negative, we blow the negative way out of proportion. We have in our HOA, so I'm not on this. It would be one more place I probably shouldn't be looking at news or whatever, but Jill gets this Facebook update of our neighborhood page. And all the people in our neighborhood comment on stuff going on our HOA, right? Well, yesterday, some poor blue-collar worker accidentally fertilized and put moss treatment on people's lawns in our neighborhood. Okay, as an accident. And people are calling for this guy's crucifixion. How can he be so insensitive to my pets and my kids and my bees? Somebody has bees just up in arms about how their bees are. It's like the whole world. I mean, our enormous fragile ego that runs with the intentions and what these people, you know what I mean? So.
And I said it doesn't quite, it's actually kind of a favor that they spread. We thought that was done for free.
Yeah,
So they
fertilize for a few months.
and put moss killers out,
It might be a positive way to look at that. But just again, the whole thing with something.
Yeah, it's the toiling, it's the trouble. The trouble of the heart, the toiling. That's what we're talking about, okay? So that spun off of this idea of Proverbs 3:5. It's hard, and I put, it's hard work to trust in yourself and in your own thinking. And again, if you can think about it in the sense of where I go with my thinking. Again, we're not talking about whether it is right or wrong. That's not the point. The point is, look at what you do with that. I talk about catastrophizing. It's easy, thinking about it or looking at this in the latest or your current conflict, especially with another person. And try to observe yourself this week when this happens. Let's keep going. So Eliphaz continues in Job chapter 5. Look at verse 6 through 9. Oh, we already said that. Let's see. He says, oh no, I didn't say that. As for me, I would, look at this. This is Eliphaz. I put in my notes. Here's work. What's the work? I'll read it. As for me, here's Job's good friend. As for me, I would seek God. So he's already put on Job the burden of, hey, Job, this doesn't just happen to good people. Come on, you must have sinned. God doesn't, do this to good people. And he says, hey, as for me, I would seek God. And to God would I commit my cause, who does great things and unsearchable, marvelous things without number. He gives rain on the earth, and he sends waters on the fields. He sets on high those who are lowly, and those who mourn are lifted to safety. So what is his friend saying right now in relation to this work thing? I mean, in one sense, he's saying some truth. This could be perceived as good to go, hey, he's pointing him to God and saying, hey, Job, go to God with this. But how is it in terms of, if we look at it in terms of toil and trouble, how would you look at this as far as what Eliphaz is saying?
Kind of judging. Saying like, maybe you should be doing your, giving on your this one time God, you should be sacrificing. Obviously,
Look, it's still with the context. You're still not doing the right thing, Job. And he's shoulding on it. Okay, he's shoulding. Sorry, he's doing shoulds again. Okay, to where he's saying, "Hey, Job." And there's an assumption that he's not doing that. How do you know he's not doing that? Look, I say that you could. I mean, because it shows that the friends sat with him for 7 days, so they know kind of what his activity is. But I often point people go, "You don't know what's going on in a person's mind." I mean, how many times do you pray and seek God and cry out to God without saying like real words out loud? Or go kneel somewhere? So there's lots of presumptions here. Yeah, and it can be perceived as kind of a judgment. Again, what I put in my notes, I said, all right, come on, Job, let's get to work. That's what I put, in terms of this work thing. All right, Job, let's go. God doesn't just do this to good people. You must be sinning. So admit your sin and give it to God and let God do his thing. Let's go. Let's start to work. Like you just said, Dave, he's already crunched the numbers. Here's the deficit. Here's the fix. That's the thing. That's what the human mind. Here's the fix. Let's go. Let's do it. Again, it's reflecting this idea of conditional blessing and curses, the cause and effect. And it really is still, the skepticism thing here is, it's with a wrong understanding or belief about God. Did somebody raise their hand? Yeah,
I
Jill.
actually said this when I wasn't here ago. But just the lady said, if it were me, is what I introduced to me, I would seek God. Sort of like, if I were in your shoes, I'd be doing this a whole lot better than you are. So even that attitude that we can have when we look at someone else's situation, it's not, it could be as hard as you're making it. Like if I were in your shoes.
Yeah, and again, you guys, think about this for a second. Is it good to point somebody to God and say, hey, what? Even what he's saying right there? Yeah, it's good. It is good, right? But now think about, I'll tell you the reaction I have when I'm in my funk and struggle, and I go and I'm sitting across from a friend and I'm being transparent and authentic and telling them about my trouble. If they start to tell me how to fix it, I mean, in my older age now, I feel more comfortable to say, hey man, I thank you. But we're done. Because I'm not looking for a fix. And you think I don't know that I need to go to God with this? What am I, a moron? I went to God with this the whole way over here. And now you're telling me to do it? Yeah, thank you.
So then it just comes down to time.
Comes down to timing, meaning,
People just want to be commiserated
Well,
with.
we as humans want instant gratification, but the Lord isn't always grant us that. So
that's
then
right.
Us resolving to, okay, it's not my time, it's your time.
You mean like God's timing?
Exactly. And he's going to do that, or pull you out of whatever funk you might be in. His, not necessarily. He's
Well,
not
and that's
necessarily
we're going to get to that. That's a great point in the sense of when I want to get there is, okay, what do we think God's doing here? God's allowing Job to stay in this. And we're just at the beginning, okay? We're not even like in the hard part yet. I mean the hard part as far as the intense Job still experiencing and feels like God isn't there, okay? But that's where we got to keep on saying, hey, okay, so what do we think God's doing here? And I want to ask that before we stop here, but let me get to a couple more of these verses. So, more hard work. Look at Job chapter 6. I'll read 1 through 4. This is Job now responding to Eliphaz. Oh, that my vexation were weighed and all my calamity laid in the balances. for then it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. Therefore my words have been rash. Look at this. Again, this is getting at human thinking. It's normal human thinking in this case. Again, we're not condemning Job for this, but look at his thinking. For the arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks their poison. The terrors of God are arrayed against me. That's some strong language now. Again, now we're starting to really, okay. If I were to be the counselor with Job at this point, and he says that to me, I would say this. All right, Job, now we're getting somewhere. Now we're getting somewhere. And where are we getting to? What is he revealing? First of all, what's the hard work? What's the toiling that he's doing right here with these words?
The equation doesn't balance. He actually says that. And laid in the balances together with my so if my grief were actually weighed and laid in the balance together with my calamity. So he calculates it out. And he's weighing these things and he's saying this doesn't balance. But yeah, that's that word.
So he's still doing that, and then, so if you've had a trouble with the concept of, so that these words of Job reflect his conflict with God, how does the next verse then help with the conflict with God piece? Because where does he go next? He's vocalizing it. We normally don't vocalize it like this. We vocalize it like in the first verse where we're going, hey, this doesn't weigh out. This doesn't seem right. You know, we can ask God why. It doesn't seem right, God. This isn't fair. And we never go to the next words of Job. Yeah. I had a hard time with the whole sin thing before because I never felt like I was like in direct rebellion against God. Like in conflict with him. Whereas now that's changed for me, and it's changed, especially as I've gone through Job, because even though you may never say these words, and these words again being, for the arrows of the Almighty are in me, my spirit drinks their poison, the terrors of God are arrayed against me. Again, we talked about this before, but one of the immediate things that humans want to do in this case is figure out the why piece, but it's who's to blame here. Again, it's automatic thinking. That little girl right there thinks that even though she probably doesn't even talk, okay? She assigns blame. She looks for blame and assigns blame. And Job is just saying it right out. I mean, he's saying, God is against me.
I think it's kind of hit me, but, you know, he even started to work, you will complete it. If you ever taught people stuff, you can only give them stuff at a certain point. Complex enough issue, you can't give them everything that they can't take it. Well, if Job was the best of them, he has to be brought down to a certain point for him to complete his work. I mean,
So Todd's kind of getting at that question as far as, so what's God doing here? What's God's work? What's he allowing, and how does it reflect what God is doing? Especially if we see it in light of this verse right here, that he who began a good work and you will complete it. So he started a good work in Job. I love the fact that you just said, I love the fact that you said it because I thought it was so important. So I hope that it was impactful for you. But Job, the book of Job is showing us the best that a man can be. Job was the best of the best. You missed that last week, so I gave you credit for it, Dave. Because Job was the best that we come. This is the Tom Brady of humans from an outward perspective. Every human that knew him looked at him and they were like, that guy's the man. He's a good guy. And even God went, yep, he's good. He is good. And yet, what did we say? Job still needed?
because he was so good, he took a heavier burden to get him to the point where he wanted.
That's interesting that you say it that way. Did you guys hear him? He said that it took a heavier burden to get him where God wanted him. I know it's almost hard to say out loud.
Well, it's like training for something. You know, you take an athlete that's in relatively good shape and you want to get them to the next stage. It's a lot more work than to take somebody that's brand new and get them to where they're a lot further than they were before.
So everything that you're saying is talking about God is doing a work. He's doing a work in Job. And like in these early stages, you just described what some of that were. You talk about it in terms of like bringing him down or a burden. But what do you, and to give you a clue, I have some of those words up here. But what is God allowing to happen in Job's life that is reflective of his work, of God's work?
God is allowing us all to see with Job that we are sustained by God's mercy, not our actions, not our works, not that toil that's in our minds.
Okay, you just said that God is teaching him that we're not sustained by our own works, but by God's mercy. Okay, we haven't seen that yet specifically, but how can we tie what we've seen already to what you just said, Dave? I mean, have an idea? Yeah.
Well, the formula that we've been discussing that Jake was mentioning is we just keep identifying the need for Jesus Christ's work on the cross. I mean, Job was before Jesus, so that last is missing the formula here. That's why it's in balance.
And grace is mathematical. It doesn't balance. There's no scale that balances grace. And look at the cross and Christ dying for us. There's no equation that makes that fit. It's just a complete lopsidedness that God would trade his son for us. Because there's no math in it. God's getting Job, and I think even his friend, because
Yep, I believe that too. Yep.
they get to the end, and you see this transition where now it's not an equation anymore. It's about a relationship, and about that relationship being sustained by God and His mercy and His grace, and separate out now, and made more akin to the reference about Abraham, Genesis, and Abraham believed God and was credited to him as righteousness. So that's where he's going. So I do like how God allows that time of the equation to start to break down. Right? I like how he structured this whole book.
So to wrap it up, since I'm trying to get done on time from now on, the simplicity of looking at what God is doing here is this right here. Is that God is exposing Job for who he is. He's exposing Job for who he is, and he's in the process of that, he's going to help Job recognize and believe what Job needs. What does Job need? Or who does Job need? He needs God and God's grace and God's mercy. So what we're seeing right now is exposition. It's an exposing of Job. It's an exposing of his heart. That he's not the best. That he needs salvation. He is a creature who is created to be in need of help. Job didn't think he needed help. He was a good guy. Full of integrity, full of wisdom, full of righteousness. He was the best of the best. Tom Brady doesn't need anything. Guess what God is doing? He's letting Job talk out loud. From out of the mouth, the heart speaks. Like we've already talked about. Out of the mouth, the heart speaks. So Job's heart is being revealed. And it's being revealed to Job. That's ultimately what we're going to see happens. So in a very simple way, we're seeing this really negative, yucky stuff that reflects every normal human being. Again, we are Job. And we can take great gratitude. I mean, it just reflects the mercy of God. To look at Job's heart, look what Job says. Job assigns blame to God here, saying, God, you're out to get me. The poison-tipped arrows that you have nailed me with are having its effect. You're doing what you intended to do. And totally wrong thinking. It's assigning blame to God. If he were to do that to any of you humans that intended good for Job, and Job was talking to you about like talking about you like this, we would say, "Yeah, we're done, Job." And guess what the Bible shows us? God says, "I'm not even close to being done. I'm God with you, and even though you don't believe it, even though you're blaming me, I'm going to show you that I'm pouring mercy out on you. And I'm going to transform you. I'm going to change you, and ultimately I'm going to give you rest." It's mind-blowing. Let me pray. Dear Lord God, I thank you for your love. I thank you for your grace in the life of Job. And I pray that you would help each one of us realize that in a kind of an amazing sense, we're all Job also, God. And I pray that you would help us to trust you, that you have started a work in each one of us. And even though it's so hard to see sometimes and even harder to understand, help us to believe that you'll complete it to the end. And everything that you do and allow in our lives, God, it is actually intended for our good, as hard as that can be sometimes. And it's because of your love and your mercy. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.